Hey everyone, I am the only Resh. Welcome to the channel. As you can see here, I have the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 digital. Fortunately, I was able to snag both of these because I love games too much not to have both. And I wanted to give my thoughts on them since I've had a decent amount of time now with each console. And I'm going to be going over the different features on each, the overall user experience, the games exclusive to each, and some things to keep in mind if you're still trying to decide which one you want. And one thing to keep in mind, I have had my PS5 since launch on November 12th, and I got the Series X on March 3rd, and it is now May 3rd. So I've had quite a bit more time with the PS5, but I've still had the Series X for a couple of months. So starting with the PS5, the biggest things we've seen advertised are the SSD making load times way faster, and the new DualSense controller with haptic feedback and adaptive triggers. And the SSD has been a really great upgrade. Remember, both the PS5 and Series X have internal SSDs, so don't worry about that being too much of a deciding factor for you. And forget the comparison videos of this console took 19 seconds to load this game and this one took 17. Those videos are interesting to look at and I like that they exist, but don't make that the reason for getting one or the other. The difference is not nearly big enough to matter between the new Xbox and the new PlayStation. And the same can be said for other performance numbers too. You will not be able to tell if one has 100 more pixels than the other one in this specific level on this specific section, and the same thing as far as if one has 2 more frames per second at this specific level in this specific combat encounter or whatever. You're not going to be able to tell with your naked eye. It doesn't matter. It just feels console war stuff, and realistically, it's not a difference that you're going to notice. Anyway, I can't imagine going back to a normal hard drive after having the SSD in both of these. It takes just a few seconds to load whatever game you're playing, and that counts for loading the game from the console's main screen and loading a saved game from the game's main menu. It's all really fast, and now I can't go without it. And it lets games load assets into the world faster, meaning there can be more characters, wildlife, and objects in the world at once, and less texture pop in, all that great stuff. One struggle most people run into with the storage space in the SSD, specifically with the PS5, because we're still on that, is you get 667 total gigabytes to use. And I know they say 825 or whatever it is advertised, but that space doesn't actually include the storage used for the operating system and all that. So you really just get 667 to use. And you can't even use all of that because the additional data, which varies in size depending on what you have installed. My PS5 right now has 278 gigabytes free, and 57 of that is the additional data, which is just taking up space. I have a decent amount of space in this one because I mostly use it for first party titles and a couple other games that I either got on PS Plus or just got cheaper on a sale on PlayStation. Most of my games are on Xbox, but I'll get into why that is later. Unfortunately, there still aren't any internal storage expansions we can use for the PS5 yet. Hopefully, that comes sooner rather than later because you can't play PS5 games on external hard drives or an external SSD. You can only play PS4 games on external storage. But in one of the last system updates for the PS5, they made it so we can store PS5 games on USB hard drives. And in order to do that, I think you do have to install it on the internal SSD first and then move it from there. And in order to play the PS5 games on the external hard drive, you need to move them back to the SSD from that drive. And it's a little bit of a mess, and moving from one storage to another is way faster than downloading, which is the purpose for this. It's not the perfect solution, but it is still better than needing to re-download things. As for the fancy new DualSense controller, this thing is so damn cool, but unfortunately it's not used to its full potential in most games. The haptic feedback and adaptive triggers are best used in Astro's Playroom, obviously because that game kind of serves as a tech demo for the new console and the new controller, while still being a really fun platformer with so many great references to classic PlayStation games. I love Astro's Playroom. And I won't beat a dead horse and tell you all the examples of it. Just know the DualSense does live up to the hype. There is a ton of potential for the adaptive triggers and the haptic feedback in this. And specifically in some games like Miles Morales, you can kind of get used to it, and it kind of takes away from how cool it is when it gets pretty normal for you. When you're swinging in Miles Morales, since you're doing that all the time, there's tension in the triggers every time you swing, and it just feels normal after a while and kind of doesn't catch your attention as much. I've also recently been playing Returnal since that just came out recently, and the DualSense actually does a lot in that game too. From feeling the raindrops in the controller, which is one of the coolest things, and the adaptive trigger actually works as controls in Returnal. So when you go to aim down sights, you pull the left trigger down halfway, and you're going to feel tension when it's at that halfway point. And when you pull all the way through that tension, you get to use your weapon's alternate fire mode. So halfway for ADS and the rest of the way for alternate fire, which actually works pretty well. At first, I didn't think I was going to be able to have that slight variation and be able to control that much, but you do get used to it and it actually feels very natural and is done very well and essentially acts as another button on the controller, which is really cool. Some people also say the battery doesn't really last in it. Personally, I haven't had that problem at all. I play for a few hours at a time easily without needing to switch controllers. And I put mine on a charging dock after every session or every 2 or 3 sessions, so I didn't really have to worry about that too much. I wouldn't take the battery life into consideration that much. Again, I haven't really had that much of a problem, and I think the people that have reported that either had faulty controllers or are just exaggerating it a lot more than it really is. Overall, I love the new controller features, and I am very excited to play more PS5 exclusive games that take full advantage of all the cool stuff you can do with this controller. And moving on to some less enjoyable topics, my experience with the PS5 hasn't been perfect so far. The biggest problem I've had is using rest mode. I know not everyone has this problem, but a very large number of people have, so it is a real issue. What happens sometimes is when I put my PS5 into rest mode while playing a game, it is supposed to suspend the game in the background, so when I turn the PS5 on again, the game should be on the screen where I left off as soon as I turn on the console. And it's a feature I've loved since it first became available with the last generation of consoles, but sometimes when I go to turn my PS5 back on after doing that, I get a black screen with a message saying a problem occurred in the system software the last time your PS5 was used. And then it has to rebuild the database and all that nonsense, but thankfully it didn't reset or delete anything. Now, the first time that happened, I was playing Miles Morales, and this was about 2 or 3 days after I got the PS5, so it was very early on. And that kind of freaked me out, so I didn't use rest mode for a couple weeks after that. And a handful of times since then I've used it. The rebuilding database thing happened 2 or 3 more times, and I didn't really want anything worse to happen. So I've basically stopped using rest mode, which kind of sucks and really bums me out. Like I said, I love that feature, but at least with the PS5, you've got that internal SSD. So starting the console from being completely shut down and loading up games from scratch doesn't take that long. So of all problems to have, this one isn't unbearable. In the future, I'm probably going to try it a couple more times to see if it's still a thing. So it might be just a problem with my PS5, and I might even be able to send that in and get a different one, maybe. But honestly, I'm not too worried about it. I'm pretty much perfectly fine just shutting it off all the way and turning it on from scratch every time. It's not that big of a deal. Now for a few things that don't really need any elaborate discussions, but I still want to mention them before moving on to the Series X. And the new home screen is pretty nice. I like how there are separate tabs for games and media, and how the PlayStation Store is integrated into the menu so it's not a whole separate app you have to open. I do kind of miss having a theme in the background like the PS4, and I'm just a bit bummed about it, that's all. It's not really that big of a deal either. I don't really like the new layout for trophies. You have to click on each trophy to see more than a few words of the description. And one thing that is pretty cool though is Game Help, which is basically integrated walkthroughs for certain segments of compatible games, which just takes out the effort of Googling a walkthrough for a part from IGN or Games Radar or Game Informer or something like that. And Game Help has helped me a lot in games like Maquettes because I'm really bad at puzzle games, so that's helped me a couple times in that game. Another really nice thing you only get with the PS5 and a PS Plus subscription is the PS Plus collection, which if you don't know is a list of 20 generation-defining games that you get for free with a PS5 and PS Plus subscription. If you had a PS4, you probably played most of these games already, but more specifically, if you missed out on the PS4 generation completely, this is such a great deal and so many of these games are absolutely must-plays. And now let's get into the Series X. Like I said at the beginning, I've had much less time with the new Xbox, but enough time to be comfortable with it. Just like the PS5, there is an internal SSD, so loading speeds are way, way better. And since I just talked about the PS5 SSD, I will skip all the in-depth talk about that. But the storage is a little bit different here. First off, we've got 802 gigabytes to use instead of 667 in the PS5. So a bit more room here and enough to actually make a difference. That's an extra 150 almost gigabytes, which is 2 reasonably sized games or Call of Duty. But of course, it's still never enough storage anyway. And right now my storage is sitting at 73 gigabytes free because of games like Apex and Call of Duty because I have those on my Series X and not on my PS5, which is why I have more room on my PS5 right now. And also, unlike the PS5, we do have an additional storage option to run next-gen games. The Seagate 1TB card, which just plugs right into the back of the Series X, which more than doubles the space for games, and that is huge. But the huge benefit comes at a huge price of $220. It would take a lot for me to buy one of those. Like, I would need to be really invested in like 5+ huge games at the same time, at least, to spend $200 on more storage for that, instead of just deleting a couple games I don't touch or moving them to an external drive because I do have an external SSD for my Xbox. But again, not to be used for next gen specific games, but something I can move other games to clear up more space. One really cool feature the Xbox Series X does is how well it does quick resume and the Xbox equivalent to rest mode. If I hit the Xbox button on my controller and turn my TV on a second later, my Xbox is already on the home screen by the time my TV turns on. It is so fast. And quick resume is also done pretty well, although I haven't experienced a ton of that yet with the specific games I've been playing. Most of my Xbox time over the past month has been on The Outer Worlds, and that game, for whatever reason, doesn't use quick resume, or at least not for me. It goes to the main menu for the game and I hit continue from there, which, again, with the SSD, it doesn't take more than 10 to 15 seconds max, so it's not a huge deal. I just wish I had that extra instant resuming of my game. And also remember, online games like Destiny 2 and Outriders won't use quick resume because you have to load into a server for those. But one game I have been playing recently that does use it well is Prey. Once I'm done playing Prey for the day, I'll save my progress, even though technically I don't even have to with quick resume. And I shut the Xbox off, and when I turn it back on and select Prey, I'm back at the exact same spot I left off in within like 5 seconds after initially pressing the Xbox button on my controller to turn on the console. And one more thing about quick resume and rest mode worth mentioning, if you have it set to go into sleep mode or rest mode or whatever you want to call it, every time you press shut down and then you unplug the power cable, nothing bad happens. But this situation compared to PlayStation, where if you put it into rest mode and unplug the power cable, it's going to yell at you and have to do a reset or rebuild storage or something like that. And the same thing if you unplug it while it's still on. Meaning if a fuse blows while you're playing a game, it's the same situation. So I really appreciate the Series X not having problems with those situations. It's just that much less worried I have to be about those things happening. And again, the fact that I can unplug my Xbox and move it to the other room and then be back where I left off in a game in under 10 seconds from plugging the Xbox into the wall still blows my mind. It's so fast and it's so convenient, and it's still weird for me to have that be that fast. It's awesome. As for the controller, it does have a couple tweaks from the Xbox One controller, some gripping texture on the back and the triggers, and a new D-pad that I think is a lot better for the most part, if I can get that to pull up here. The new D-pad, instead of just being the 4 buttons, it kind of has this rolling pattern, so you can do pretty much each in-between section as well pretty easily without having to try and press both at the same time. It kind of just leans with you if you're trying to go that direction. And also the dedicated share button was a great addition, which is the one right in the middle here. I love having the share button as another option on here, like PlayStation had starting with the PS4. Getting screenshots by holding it for a couple seconds and getting a clip just by tapping it once, depending on your personal settings, because you can change that. You don't even need to bring up the guide or have anything other than your game on screen, and it's a really nice quality of life improvement, and it makes things a bit easier and just more convenient to capture games. But again, other than that, basically the same design as the Xbox One controller, except for the share button and the D-pad, and the textures on the back, that's pretty much it. As opposed to the DualSense compared to the DualShock 4, completely different designs for the most part, other than like button placement's all the same, but the size is different, the form factor is different, the triggers are different. Complete redesign with this, a very good one, I would say. One thing that you could say is a bit of a bummer, but in a very unimportant way, I guess you could say, is the home screen on the Xbox Series X is the same as it is on the Xbox One. And in the back of my mind, sometimes it does make it feel a little bit less next gen when I turn it on and I see the same thing I saw on my Xbox One when I had that. But it's obviously not true since it is just a visual layout thing. But we're also used to getting a new home screen with every generation, so it just kind of feels weird. But you also have to remember that the Xbox One home screen changed multiple times since 2013. So they've been improving it time and time again and will continue to update and change it throughout the generation most likely. Unlike PlayStation, where they kept it pretty much the same on PS4 from 2013 to now and in the future, and just did a big change with the PS5. Just different decisions by both platforms really, and honestly I'm fine with both. And now to move on to some more subjective thoughts. Let's talk about which one I've been on more after all this time. And obviously from November 12th until March 3rd, I was on the PS5 constantly because I didn't have my Series X yet. And for a while after getting the Series X, I was almost always on that because it was brand new. And now I do jump back and forth quite a bit between the two depending on what game I'm playing, but I can definitely say I'm on my Series X more than my PS5, unless there's a new PlayStation exclusive that I'm interested in. And there are two big main reasons for that. One, that's where the vast majority of my friends play, and two, Game Pass. One of the biggest deciding factors for people that do like to play games with their friends a lot is obviously which console their friends are on. Makes sense, and since Game Pass has been getting such a big push the past year or two, I can honestly say it is a deciding factor for a lot of people. There have been a lot of new games recently that have launched on Game Pass that PlayStation players had to pay full price for. Destiny 2's Beyond Light expansion, Wasteland 3, Yakuza Like a Dragon, Outriders, and I've played a ton of smaller indie games that I ended up loving that I would have never given a chance to without Game Pass because I didn't want to end up wasting that money if I didn't like the game. And there are also a ton of older and recent games on Game Pass that plenty of people still love to play, like Rainbow Six Siege. Think of all the first party titles that are on there that a lot of people still play. Master Chief Collection, the Forza games, Gears of War. Now Bethesda games like Doom, The Elder Scrolls, Fallout, Prey, Dishonored. Other things like the old Fable games, Flight Simulator, Minecraft, The Outer Worlds, The Outer Wilds, Sea of Thieves, the Yakuza games, Final Fantasy games, Port Remains of Edith Finch. And you can also think about all the future first party titles that are going to be on Game Pass day one, like Halo Infinite, Fable, the next Forza, Hellblade 2, Psychonauts 2, Avowed, Everwild, State of Decay 3, Starfield, The Elder Scrolls 6. And if you get Game Pass Ultimate, you also get an EA Play membership, so you get EA games like Madden, NHL, FIFA, Battlefield, Titanfall, Unravel, The Sims, Star Wars Battlefront, Star Wars Squadrons, Jedi Fallen Order. The list keeps going on and on and on, and it's really awesome. I did not expect to go on this long about Game Pass in this video, but Game Pass is insane, and you get a ridiculous number and variety of games with it. Variety and diversity is probably the best way I can describe Game Pass. Are there a lot of games on there you won't really care for? Probably. There's a lot of games on there that I don't really care for. But are there also a ton of games you would love? Absolutely. Variety and diversity of games on Game Pass is, again, the best way I can explain it. Also, keep in mind, we don't know how exclusive future Bethesda games will be. I talked about this in a video recently to look at how likely the exclusivity is, if you really want to check that out. And while on the topic of the games, obviously PlayStation has incredible past and future hits. Ratchet & Clank, Spider-Man, God of War, Horizon Forbidden West, The Last of Us, Uncharted, Ghost of Tsushima, games like Returnal, which just came out, Gran Turismo, Concrete Genie, Dreams, tons of fantastic exclusives that you can't get on Xbox. And they've also been doing a bit better with PlayStation Plus games recently. Possibly to try and compete with Xbox Game Pass, possibly. Games like Bugsnax, Destruction All-Stars, Oddworld Soulstorm, and probably a couple more that I can't remember, all launched day one on PS Plus. So they weren't just old games trying to get a few extra bucks, these were brand new games for free on PlayStation Plus. Also, don't forget the PS Plus collection, which I talked about a little bit earlier in this video. I do think Sony will be trying to push PS Plus like that more in the future, with more games releasing with the service day one. I don't think it'll be able to compete on the same level as Game Pass anytime soon, if ever, but it can be closer than it is now. And now to give some advice on how to make your decision if that's what you're here for. Like I said before, one of the most important ones I would say is to get whatever platform your friends are on. This advice is mostly for people that almost exclusively play multiplayer games with their friends. Yes, a lot of games have crossplay now, but it is still a little bit nicer and easier to be on the same platform. And if you're mainly into single player games, this could go either way. PlayStation has all those great exclusives, like I said before, and Xbox is getting more and more studios to make first party games. But personally, I doubt that 100% of them will be console exclusive to Xbox. But anything could happen, we really don't know yet. Basically, which one of these lists sounds more appealing to you? The Last of Us, Uncharted, God of War, Horizon Forbidden West, Ratchet & Clank, Spider-Man, and Returnal, all PlayStation exclusive, can't get them on Xbox. Or Halo, Fable, Forza, Gears of War, Sea of Thieves, Hellblade 2, Avowed, can't get them on PlayStation, all on Xbox. Possibly some Bethesda games like Doom, the next Elder Scrolls, Starfield, but again, we don't know if those Bethesda games will actually be exclusive to Xbox fully or timed exclusive or multi-plat right from the go. We're not sure yet, but still something to keep in the back of your mind. And if the exclusives aren't enough to sway you one way or the other, do think about Game Pass. For $10 a month, you get tons of big and small games, variety and diversity, like I said before, of pretty much every genre, including the Xbox first-party games day one, which are all $60 at launch unless it's a smaller first-party game. And if you pay $15 a month for Game Pass Ultimate, you also get EA Play with all those EA games I talked about before, and you get xCloud, where you can stream games to your phone, tablet, or wherever else. Seriously, Game Pass is insane and definitely something I would say should be taken into consideration when picking one console or the other. If you have other specific questions or want some more information about anything I talked about in this video, please let me know in the comments of this or hit me up on Twitter at TheOnlyResh. I would be more than happy to talk more about this. If you want more gaming discussions like this, as well as Let's Plays and new release info, be sure to subscribe here on YouTube. And you can follow me and my other content on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, basically anywhere at The Only Resh. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, beat that boss, find that last collectible, roll those credits. I'm out.